oh, can I deduct that? I said, yes. And it's going to save you taxes. So we go back and, of course, we can amend tax returns back to 3 years, which, as Jennifer knows, is one of my favorite things to do when I see someone else has prepared the return, whether it was the taxpayer who self-prepared it, God forbid, or another accountant who's not familiar with real estate tax law. At my company, Tax Masters Inc., we specialize in anything to do with real estate, whether it's for investors or landlords or developers or whatever. And since it's our specialty, we know what to look for. So when the return is prepared by another accounting firm, we'll go back and ask a lot of questions and check a lot of numbers. And hopefully we can get the client big refunds. And they pay tax, they pay interest on the tax refunds. And the interest is taxable, but your federal tax refund is not. And I think one of the biggest refunds that we've gotten recently was about $60,000 because we amended the gentleman's 3 years tax returns, because that's as far back as we could go. And we got about $60,000 on his federal income taxes and about $20,000 on his state income taxes. So it ended up being about $80,000. And guess what happened to the money?
What?
The wife was at home when the refunds came, and she took the money and she didn't tell the husband it arrived, and she ordered a whole new kitchen and bathroom renovation, and she ordered a new car for herself because she said that was found money that they didn't know they had, and she was going to spend it on things that she wanted to spend them on, since her husband had been so stupid to spend the previous years doing his own tax return. So the money went for a good cause, and of course it increased the value of their home tremendously. And she's driving a very nice Lexus also.
Well,
lots of good stories.
I love those stories, and I think it's really important because I think it's really important to realize how important insurance is, and that it has benefits. You have the tax write-offs, you have all sorts of benefits. So I guess Sylvia wasn't able to zip on to the Zoom. So if you're tuning in, we went to YouTube Live. We are YouTube Live. You can't see Sylvia, but she is not a ghost. She is in Clubhouse, and I'm going to go ahead and let's just get started because we're already 20 minutes into our hour. And Sylvia, I would love for you to share a little bit about your experience. I know you've been doing insurance for over 20 years, and I know you love teaching people about insurance. And today, of course, we're talking about real estate and insurance. But Sylvia, welcome.
Hi, thank you guys for having me. I'm so sorry, Jennifer, that I can't get on this link. I'm still working on it, but in the interim, let's get started. Linda, I love that story. And thank you for sharing that information about going back 3 years to adjust your tax returns, because I think people think that they get it wrong or something comes in late. They didn't include something in their tax returns that should have been included, and they just leave it to chance, and then they wind up getting audited or something comes back, there's a mistake. So that was really important information. Thank you so much for sharing that. Jen, thank you so much for having me here. I really appreciate it. I apologize about the technical difficulties that we're having today, but I wanted to get to Appleseed's question because he mentioned something that I think is really important, and you and I should kind of detail this for him. When you're going from, I think you said, Appleseed, that you are going from Section 8 housing to purchasing a home. Was that my understanding of your question? And you wanted to understand how your insurance is going to change. Now, are you going from renting? Are you saying that you're going from renting to ownership? And are you asking for what the change is from renting a property to owning a property? Was that the question? I just want to make sure I understood, so I answer you correctly.
I think the new Clubhouse app, one of the things that you see is the little red phone thing. And so I think that means he's actually on the phone right now. So he's not listening to us, but we can circle back to him. But basically my understanding is real estate. He was buying real estate investment property. And I think it was a 5-unit, and he's doing Section 8. So he was asking about what kind of insurances should he have. One, because it's a multi-unit. It sounds like it's a smaller multi-unit, but it's also, and he's in the Washington, D.C. area. I think he's in the Maryland area of Washington, D.C. So anything you want to share as far as real estate investment properties, and is there anything specific for different types of, if you're doing an Airbnb versus if you're going to do a Section 8 or long-term rentals, all the different variations of real estate investment properties.
Yeah, so when you are a landlord, right, number one, you want to protect yourself. You have to protect yourself from, some of the stupid things that sometimes your renters can do, right? You want to protect your liability. You also want to make sure that the ownership usage of the home is correct. So a landlord policy is completely different from a primary homeowner's policy. A primary homeowner's policy or a secondary homeowner's policy will suggest that you live in that residence, that you spend time in that residence.
Right.
A landlord policy is really put into place for people that you are extending your residence to. And so the liability and the risk that assumes is a little bit different than if it was an owner-occupied residence. So we want to make sure that, number one, the usage of the home is set up properly, because if not, the coverages can be completely different based on how that home is used. One of the other things that I see that people who rent property, they own and rent property, a lot of times they don't account for their loss of use, okay, loss of rents, right? If, for instance, a tenant burns the house down, and you are collecting $15,000 a month in rents in that 4-family or that 5-family or that 6-family, right? What you want to account for in your insurance policy is that you are covering yourself for the rents that you get every single month.
Right.
While that home is being repaired, right? That's a very, very big deal.
Yeah, I just talked to somebody recently. He had $5,000 was his income that he got from his rents. And then when it stopped, because of course there was an issue, it was really a big problem.
Well, I think the biggest thing, Jennifer, that we see is that when people get insurance, what I find very often is that they just want the cheapest. Give me the cheapest and the best. The mortgage company is giving me a $200,000 loan, but the home is worth $400,000. Just help me get to, I just want to insure what the mortgage what the mortgage company is asking me to insure. And that is really dangerous, right? Because if you've put $100,000 up, you've put $50,000 up, or this home hasn't been appraised and the value of this home is $400,000, you've only got a $250,000 mortgage, you've got $150,000 worth of assets exposed. And so I think what's most important is that one, because it looks like I'm finally on another.
Yeah, or just mute it. If you mute it, we can still continue to keep streaming, or either one. Or if you want to start on, because now at least I have your beautiful picture. And
I'm here. I'm here. Can you hear me?
But I still can't hear you.
Oh no!
I can see you, but I can't hear you. Try your audio one more time.
All right, so I'm muting on YouTube.
Perfect.
And I'm on audio for Clubhouse, but I feel like I hear a return in the things on YouTube.
Yeah, there's like an echo.
Yeah, so I feel like Jennifer, I need to drop off the YouTube because I want.
Yeah. Go ahead, drop off the YouTube and we'll just stream it from Clubhouse. I think that's the only way to get it today.
Yeah, I don't want to hold this up. But so my point was that sometimes when buyers and investors, when they don't understand what they need, and if the mortgage company is telling them you need this, but they haven't really assessed what they've put into the property, then a lot of times what happens is they leave themselves exposed. And so I think the relationship between your insurance professional and the buyer and your customer is very important. And I don't think we talk about it enough. I think customers and consumers understand that they need an accountant, right? That they need someone to kind of like really give them the specialist language and the specialist the specialist information on their taxes. They realize that they need that from a legal aspect when they have an attorney. They understand it when they bring in a real estate professional, but on the insurance end, and I think what I've tried to connect it to is that I think in this country, the way we've always purchased insurance has kind of, for Main Street America, has kind of been a little bit happenstance. So Main Street America picks up the phone and dials 1-800-INSURANCE.
Yes.
Talk to a person one time, right? You never speak to that person again. You don't have a relationship with them. And normally when you buy insurance, you're under the gun. You need the insurance to get a car, right? In order to get this loan, in order to get this lease, I need this insurance. This is what, so you're under the gun, right? You're frustrated. You're already spending money. The last thing you want to spend money on additionally is the insurance. But so you want to get this done because you have to get it done, but you don't necessarily want to establish a relationship. And one of the things that my wealthy clients understand is that that's not the right way to buy insurance.
Right.
That's not the right. They want someone that they can have a relationship with, someone that they can refer to, someone that will be willing to do the education piece of it, just like your attorney will, just like your accountant will, and just like your real estate professional will. And so I think the narrative around how we purchase, how we buy, how we spend, and what we're willing to spend on our insurance has to change, because this is one of the oldest industries in this country, and it's always existed in the space to help people, to prevent risk, to protect them against their risk. And so if we really start to do that work, I think then the conversations may change, and we'll find that we can help people a lot better. Jennifer, I'm in the process of doing research on this, and I think you'll appreciate this because you, like me, we do a lot of research and background in our industry.
Yes.
I will tell you that about 70% of the entire insurance buying population is underinsured.
Yes.
Underinsured. And why that information is so important is because when you're underinsured, and we see right now this storm in my region, I'm in New Jersey, and we just got slammed by Hurricane Ida, okay?
Yeah.
I am talking to people who this is their first time ever looking at what they purchased for their insurance, for their home insurance, and they don't have the right stuff. They don't have the right coverage limits. And it's really an easy problem to solve before you have a loss, right? People think it's so expensive to have the right coverage. A lot of times what we're talking about to make sure that your policy is endorsed with backup of sewer and water drain coverage, or buying a flood insurance policy in a non-flood prone territory. We're talking about a couple $100s a year. And people don't think like that. Oh, I don't think that they need it until we have something like this. Unfortunately, I know people who died in this storm. Yeah, I know a family who attends my church. The father went into the basement to save his daughter. They had a basement apartment. The flood waters rushed into their basement. The father went downstairs to try to save his daughter, and they both died. They both drowned. You know, I know people who've lost cars. They thought they paid off their car loan last year, and they think, oh, I don't need full coverage insurance. I'm going to just drop down to the liability. Well, if you only have liability only and you lost your car in this flood, you don't have any coverage. You know, because that coverage is covered under your comprehensive deductible coverage. So I think it's like things like this that we don't talk about enough. And I think this is so important, the work that you do, bringing these conversations to the forefront and having these necessary discussions. I just wish, you know, that these kinds of discussions would bring in, you know, 100, 200 people, like when we're talking about something silly, because this is important. It really is important information.
I agree. And I think it's one of those ones where that's one of the reasons I always try to record them and put them on the social medias as well, because sometimes, you know, they find the conversation there and they can go ahead and find out about it. And what we started today with John Lee was telling a story about, you know, one of his real estate investment properties and a homeless person going inside of it. And then just trying to get warm, he caught the place on fire and burned it down. And that was the first time that John realized that, you know, he didn't have the right insurance. And that was so frustrating to have the wrong insurance. And I mean, again, we learn from the mistakes, but like you said, I think number one, you know that I'm so passionate about financial literacy across the board, and insurance is one of them. Real estate, again, is a huge aspect that most people they don't understand it well enough. And they may have, more than one person has come to me who's bought multiple properties in their lifetime. And then they came to me and they were like, oh my gosh, I didn't know half of what you're teaching me. I feel like, I'm drinking from a fire hose trying to understand this information. And that's when I've tried to make it fun and silly. And I really want to make sure that people have an opportunity to understand that, not knowing it can cost you so much money. And again, I've made the mistakes, especially with insurance. Oh my gosh, I got to get the insurance for the car. They're telling me I got to get it. I can't pick up the car until the insurance is there. And then I'm calling some 1-800 number. And again, it's super frustrating. And it's been such a pleasure to know you over the years, because again, I love sending clients to you and having you actually help educate them and I hate to say it, they have to decide that they want to know before they're actually going to open up their mind and their understanding. Because if they think they already know all about it, which is something I find all the time with real estate. Oh, I know all about it. I don't need to know anymore. And I'm like, no, that's not true. You don't know all about it. And so give us a chance to actually help you understand it better. And then it's just amazing what you can learn. So I would love for you to talk a little bit more about what are some of the basic things that people need to know, especially people who are going into. One of the things I've seen a huge trend in is people really, especially in states like Florida, California, people are really interested in the short-term rental, whether it's vacations by owner, Airbnbs, whatever it is. They love the short-term rental thing, but they don't understand, especially because these big platforms say, oh, don't worry, we'll take care of anything if something goes wrong. And that's not true. And they need to understand what the insurance is. So I'd love for you to talk about that a little bit more, if you could.
Yeah, that's an important conversation to have, Jennifer. And thank you so much for raising those issues. Our industry, our share economy industry is in a tremendous level of boom right now, right? And I think it's not just that these new shiny toys have come into the market. It's also because shared economies exist because people need to share their expenses. It's very expensive to live, especially in places like Florida, like you mentioned, like California. And so people do this to offset their annual costs, their housing costs, right? We talk about, I know Linda can talk more specifically about how much money or how much of your annual income should go towards housing. The general rule of thumb is somewhere around 33%. Well, we've got people in places that are high rent neighborhoods or high ownership neighborhoods in New York, and New Jersey, where I live, is extremely expensive to live. California, Florida, these are high rent districts. And so sometimes it can cost in the neighborhood of 50 to 60% of your annual income to live. And people just can't afford it. And so what they do is they jump into the shared economy to offset their costs, their annual costs. Well, what I like to tell my clients is that anytime you have a material change to your lifestyle, that is a conversation that you need to have with not only your attorney, not only your accountant, you also need to have it with your insurance professional. Because the insurance that you take out, the questions that you're being asked when a policy is underwritten, they are holding you to those questions, those answers. Those are representations. Those are warranties under that policy. And if any of that information starts to change, you need to let your insurance provider know that, or else it changes the level of coverage, the nature of the risk that they originally underwrote when they took the policy on, and that could potentially change your coverage, right? So one of the things that I like to talk about with Airbnb and those markets, right? If you're now going to be renting your home for short-term stays, that's no longer a primary home insurance policy. There is an endorsement that you can add to that policy. So if you live in the house sometimes, and then often other times you're renting the property, you may need to consider that policy that home is now a business. And if that home is a business, then you need to insure it as a business. So the type of policy that you need would change. You would need more like a landlord style policy where you rent to others. If you have a home in a hot coastal neighborhood, right? And we see this in Florida a lot. Jennifer, I know I have clients who rent their homes for like they rent their homes for 12 weeks. So for 5 months, right, of a season, just a hot season, May, maybe to October. They can make what they pay in their mortgage for the year in just those 5 months, right? So if you do that though, you need to let your insurance company know, because you probably need another type of insurance, which is what we call RTO, rent to own. And that changes the style of the coverage that you have, right? And you need to let your insurance provider know that, because there's other liabilities that exist. You're renting to a short-term rental party. They come in, they are in for, let's say, 2 weeks, okay? They're staying, somebody's smoking, they burn the house down, right?
Yep.
Exactly. That's not a yay. That's a
That's an
The first thing the insurance company wants to know is how this fire took place.
Yep.
And the minute that they hear that you were renting to someone else, right, in a home that you are insuring as your primary residence, you run the risk of your claim not being covered. And insurance companies, they love to find a reason. I hate to say it, but it's true. They love to find a reason why whatever you told them is not what happened, and they're not going to pay the claim.
Right.
And under the policy terms and conditions, they have the right that if you misrepresent yourself, if you give a warranty that this is your primary residence and nobody else will be there, and now you turn around and you're renting the home as a business, they have the right to not pay the claim under the policy terms. People need to know that.
Yeah.
People need to know that. And I think Airbnb and these other VRBO, they're great markets, but I don't think that they explain this enough to the people that sign up to do business with them. And yes, they pick up some shared liability, but they don't pick up the expense of what will happen if your home burns to the ground, if you have massive water damage, if somebody goes to sleep and leaves the sink running. They don't pick up those kinds of things. And so that is the conversation that we really need to be having with buyers. How do you intend to use this property? You know, and those are questions that I ask very often. Are you going to use this? You know, is the need for this home going to change depending on your income or your expenses? And if the answer is possibly or maybe, then we make sure that we address that at the outset, because it's critically important.
I think it's so important with all real estate, and especially because so often, as you said, we are getting into this shared economy where you're seeing 2 or 3 families move in together, and they're using the house in different ways. Like some of it could be for their principal residence, but then some of it is going to be for, again, it could be for just a couple months of short-term rental, but it's also, it has 2 uses now. It's not just one use. And I think that's happening more and more and more. And it's really important that you understand what is happening. One other question I want to make sure that we talk about that is so important as well is that a lot of people are looking at, in Washington, D.C., I think it's probably similar to New York in some ways. When COVID-19 happened, people did not like condos and co-ops. The condos and co-op boards, you know, they all just had these rules that you know, some of their owners were not happy with. I mean, in Washington, D.C., there were some condos that wouldn't let you get food delivered to your door. You could get it to the street down below, so you have to come running down and wait for, you know, somebody to deliver food. And then they made it really hard for buying and selling because of showing property. Again, COVID restrictions. So it was interesting because one of the things we found is that the condo and the co-op market is very different. And I would say it's not as hot as owning your own single family home. However, it's made it now to the point where it's the first time home buyers like likely choice. And so again, here we end up with a group, if I can say if I can clump a bunch of people together that don't have any idea about insurance. And so will you talk a little bit about how not every condo is the same with insurance? Even condos and co-ops are different, the way that they're insured and the way that the ownership is. But it's really important that you actually have a conversation, because is it a big condo? Is it a small condo? Does it have only 4 units, or does it have 300 units? All of that is really important. So will you talk a little bit about insurance when it comes to like a condo or a co-op?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the things that I think that we don't talk often enough about either with condos is the master policy, right?
Yeah.
So when you're buying a condo or a co-op, there's a master insurance policy in place that the association or the co-op board of that condo or co-op, they have in place for the building and the common areas of the residents, right? As a shareholder with a co-op structure, you're a shareholder. With a condo structure, you are a unit owner, right? So if there's 300 units, you own 1/300th, right, of the building, right? That's how it's doled out. But there's a master policy that exists, and there's also a monthly fee that you're assessed as a unit owner as well as a co-op owner. You're assessed a monthly fee, and that monthly fee goes towards the payment of the master policy. Well, some of those bylaws and agreements, you always want to ask for the bylaw and the proprietary lease agreement when you're purchasing a condo or a co-op, because that information is critical to tell you the structure that you need for when you go to buy your own insurance policy. On some of these condo units, the master policy is responsible for the full unit, right? All you really need to be responsible for is what we call walls out or walls in.
Yeah.
Anything that's not affixed to the walls, that's your responsibility. Anything you can pick up and walk away with, that's your responsibility. There are other policies, right, with like a co-op where you really own that piece of the building and you're responsible for all of it. All of it. If it burns up, it's your responsibility to repair it. One of the biggest things that we see, one of the biggest forms of loss, it is the biggest form of loss in condo and co-ops. As a matter of fact, just recently, they are developing an app, a platform where they can tell you the buildings around the country that have been a critical, that have had major losses, water damage losses. And insurance companies use that data to decide whether or not they even want to insure people, unit owners in these buildings. And it's because the insurance company has lost a lot of money in the condo and co-op market for liability, for water damage losses. If you live on the 10th floor and your water leaks, water will travel the path of least resistance. You could have somebody on the 4th floor getting water damage from the 10th floor, right? And everybody that's between those units on every floor is being affected. So these are some of the key issues. And some of these buildings, especially in New York, I underwrite a lot of buildings in New York. These buildings are 150 years old. And so is the piping, right?
I know.
These things first, they cost thousands of dollars of damage, right? And all these people are affected. And so, you have to definitely, when you are purchasing, Jennifer, I can't tell you how important it is to have an attorney, to have a smart real estate professional who will tell you, talk with your attorney, talk with your insurance professional about the contract that you're buying, right? And then having your attorney read through that contract and share with you the details. Oh, this is what you need to know. But also your insurance professional. I can't say it enough. Picking up the phone and dialing 1-800-INSURANCE, they generally are never going to look at the proprietary lease agreement. They're not going to look at the bylaws of the condo unit to kind of pick out the areas where you need to be aware of what is your responsibility. One of the other major issues of buying a condo and buying a co-op is loss assessment.
Yeah.
When you own common areas of a condo or co-op, you have common areas that you are a percentage held responsible for. So if it's 300 unit owners, you're 1/300th responsible for the common areas in the building. That means the laundry room, that means the front area. That means the statues that they've built in this property. So something happens, somebody comes, the roof, right? The roof of the building, right? The roof of the building leaks. You get 1-300, and it's gonna cost $75,000 to repair the roof. You get a bill for 1-300 of the $75,000. Loss assessment is a coverage that is featured under your insurance policy that most people don't even know exists. And the standard loss assessment that comes out on these policies, Jennifer, is like $500. It's like $1,000. But for $100 a year, you can increase it to like $50,000 of coverage to make sure that you have protection, so that if you are assessed a fee in a common area of a building, that your insurance policy can pick up some of that expense. And I think these are just like some of the random conversations that we really need to have when people are purchasing condos and co-ops and they don't happen enough.
And I agree. Thank you so much for saying that. And it's funny because the laws around real estate agents and what we can advise or educate is very, very strict. I mean, I think it's so weird because crime rates and education are two of the most important factors when people are buying a home. And we're supposed to not, by our licenses, we are not supposed to talk about crime rates, and we're not supposed to talk about, is it a good school or is it a bad school system? And it's crazy. And so I'm like, well, I can point you to resources, but you have to figure it out yourself. And I can't give you my opinion because that can get me into a whole lot of liability and trouble. And it's the same thing around insurance. And I can't tell how many times somebody has said, so I'm a first-time home buyer and I'm looking at these condo documents or these co-op documents, and they are so extensive and so confusing. And I don't understand what a master insurance policy is, or is this, is the reserves good enough? Or, how does this relate to my financial stability? And again, that's one of the reasons I want to make sure we keep having these conversations, because it's so, so important to realize that most people don't know unless you're in that niche industry. And then there are these weird restrictions on, I want to say us, because I am a licensed real estate agent in Virginia, DC, and Maryland. But it's weird because to not have the conversation and be like, I need you. And so I always recommend, I need you to call your insurance professional and hopefully not a 1-800 number. And I need you to talk to a lawyer. And again, a lot of times people don't do that because, that would be really expensive. And I'm like, no. Most attorneys will talk to you. But just like I love Linda DeMarla, who's in here today, she will take your last 3 years and she will review this. She'll have her staff review them. She takes out a red pen and starts circling all the mistakes you've made and the ways that you could have deducted or made better choices, shall we say, on it when you're filing your taxes. And the same thing with you. I know that you will easily review somebody's insurance, where they are, and then also have that discussion. And that's not something that they necessarily are paying you for, right?
Right, Jennifer, absolutely. We do a lot of the work that we do is pro bono, honestly. It's unfortunate, but you know what? It makes me sleep comfortably at night. I've got clients that are starting to get their checks. We're in week 4 of Hurricane Ida. I've got clients that are starting to get their checks. And I feel really good about the fact that they were protected, in this storm. But it's so often exactly what you said, Jennifer. And you know what else is key? When I'm listening to you talk, I'm thinking, because I do business, I'm licensed in 35 states. And so I do business all over the country. And the conversations state to state are very different. In New Jersey, when we buy properties, you have to go through an attorney review. Right. That's not the case in Georgia. Mm-hmm. I don't believe that that's the case in Maryland. Right.
No, right.
So
right.
if you don't get counsel from an attorney on the home buying purchase, a lot of times you miss things. You don't even know these things exist. And I think it's critically, and that's why I think an insurance broker is one of the most important relationships in the home buying process, as well as your real estate broker, because it almost becomes familial. We spend so much time together. We're going out looking at homes together every night. We're breaking bread together. We're having dinner together because we're doing all of this stuff together. And you're right, Jennifer. The industry does, on your end, more so than my end, really critique or put in, disclaimers about what you can't say. That stuff doesn't really exist on my end. And so I often tell my clients, I really think you need to talk through an attorney, and these are the things that you really need to consider when you're purchasing, right? But I am within my wheelhouse with my 20 years in the industry. I'm within my wheelhouse to point out red flags.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm not out of bounds when I review contracts or proprietary lease agreements or master policies. I'm not out of bounds when I do that work. And that's why I'm saying to you, it is critically important to make sure that that is part of the process, that you have a qualified insurance broker. I like to use the word broker because the difference between that, a broker, an insurance broker, and an insurance agent, or 1-800-INSURANCE, is that we work for you. So we care more about what our consumer, our customer is purchasing. We're protecting you.
Yeah.
I'm not a captive of the insurance agency. I'm not only offering State Farm's products. I represent the client. And so I'm making sure that the client, you know, is as informed in their purchase as possible. And I do think that that's critically important. And you're so right, Jennifer. Most people, when they're out buying homes, the things that they are really thinking about is school systems, whether or not this is a turnkey home or whether or not this is a hot or booming city. They are not thinking about the things that are really, really, really important and really behind the scenes. You know, that building in Florida this year that we saw collapse.
Oh, yeah.
That's going to change this industry tenfold. The conversations around what happened and all the mistakes that were made. People don't know that as consumers, you know, when you're buying, you are most empowered before you sign that paperwork.
Yeah.
And when there's a condo association or a co-op board, you want to, the same way they're interviewing you to find out whether or not you're a fit for that building, you also want to know if they're a fit for you, right? Yep. You want to know whether or not, when's the last time they've had these buildings inspected? When's the last time somebody has come in and done a mold review? When is the last time the pool was checked, right? That building in Florida had a rooftop pool. The pool had been leaking for years, and there have been critical recommendations and inspection reports around that pool 5 or 6 times, and the building never did it. They never did the work. And so all those people died. So many people lost their lives. There's going to be landmark lawsuits around that building for years to come. These are the kinds of things that consumers need to know about.
Yeah.
These are the questions that they need to ask about. These things are critically important. You know, if you're spending $500,000 on an apartment, you need to know the ins and outs of what's happening, not only with the unit that you're purchasing, but what's happening, what's the upgrades, what's the upkeep, you know, what's the maintenance look like for that entire building, because it's important.
It is I'm so glad you said that, because again, it's something that so often people need to realize. This is when you're empowered, is right before you sign. And this is when you should be asking all the questions. And like what you said earlier, I think it's so important that you ask the right professional, the one who can help you. Like the real estate agent should not be the one answering your insurance questions or your legal questions, or God forbid, your tax questions. And believe me, we get all of them. And I'm like, oh, wait. That's why I always talk about, you should build your yay team, and every one of those people on there should help you say yay every day. And I mean that with my whole heart, is that every single one should be educating you and helping you, you know, create those yay decisions that make you feel 100% empowered, and that you're doing the best thing you can to insulate and protect your family and your financial well-being.
Absolutely. I'd love to hear Linda and John weigh in on that, because that is so important.
I was going to say, let's go ahead. I know, Linda, I would love for you to talk a little bit about what we were just discussing. I know I asked you here to speak a little bit. Will you talk about taxes and the impact of insurance and what we've been chatting about?
Yes. Well, the best thing about taxes is that you get lots of deductions, and one of the most important deductions anybody can have is insurance. The more I listen to Sylvia, the more I realize I need to send out another newsletter. We have over 3,000 clients that we do taxes for, and I would be willing to bet they fall into the same category that Sylvia says. They're underinsured or improperly insured. And because it's deductible, of course, that doesn't mean it's free. Just because you get a tax deduction doesn't mean you get it back in your pocket, but you do get back a portion of it. And it's so important. It's sort of like if you take an umbrella with you when you go out to the picnic, it definitely won't rain. But if you don't take the umbrella, it seems like it's more likely to rain. So I always tell my clients, insurance is really, really important because hopefully you won't need it. Hopefully it's just going to be a tax deduction that you never really need to enforce or take advantage of. But Sylvia provides such a wonderful service. Her clients are very lucky to have her. And all of those of you who are listening, please, I can't encourage you too much to speak to your insurance people, speak to Sylvia, and get proper insurance, because when you need it, you really, really need it. I hope that helps. This is Linda, over and out.
Thank you, Linda. And I wanted to open the floor before we finish our hour here. I know there were some hands up earlier. We were in the middle of chatting with Sylvia. So if anybody has any questions, feel free to raise your hand now, and we can bring you to the stage and you can ask questions. And John, now that we have Sylvia here, I know you said earlier that you had a question for Sylvia. Do you want to ask her your question now?
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Sylvia, for spending your time with us this morning. Very valuable. Insurance is one of those things that I know we were having a conversation the other day with some other investors. And one of the things, this is a little bit different than the question, but I just wonder if you could talk a little bit about it. But they were trying to compare, their rental landlord insurance, to one to the other. And there's so many factors. I know it's really hard to compare apples to apples, but there's factors like what credit score, zip codes, previous claims, things like that. And of course, the size of the home and usability. Can you talk just a minute on that? What goes into the factors on adjusting the premiums? Thank you. I'm John.
Oh, for sure, John. That was a great question. So when you are deciding on an insurance product, they are also deciding on you, right? So what most people are concerned about is price. But they don't kind of loop in what goes into the pricing. And exactly what John said is part of the pricing. Your credit score matters, it really does matter, because for an insurance company, and while I sometimes think that it's unfair, it really matters to an insurance company, not only your financial liquidity, but also your financial wholeness, how you respond to bills that are due. An insurance company looks at that when they're deciding on, the price point that they set, because to them, it matters, well, how long will you look at something that needs repair and allow it to just sit there, right? That's what they're thinking about when they decide what they use credit for, right? So it's location. It is where this property is. Unfortunately, I've seen in the past, yes, where the zip code matters because it allows what we know as a redlining practice, different rates to be charged for certain communities and different communities, which is completely unfair. But credit is another area where it allows insurers to be strategic about the pricing that they set based on your level of responsibility, your level of financial liquidity, and your level of credit worthiness. Also, the square footage of the home, it matters. The updates that the home has had since purchase, the updates, if there's flood, if you're in an area that floods, that matters, on the pricing. It matters whether or not you have alarms on the home. It matters on whether or not when you're renting to other parties, what kind of credit checks you do on them, what kind of background investigations you do on them, to make sure they're worthy of living. Critically important in the factors that are used when people are deciding what it's going to cost for the pricing of the insurance. Yeah, those are and your claims history. Absolutely. If you've had a number of claims, if you've had a water damage claim on the same house 3 times, chances are, it's going to be very hard for you to be able to get insurance. But all policies are not built and structured the same. And so I like to just really reiterate the point that when you're looking for the cheapest insurance, chances are you're getting a basic level policy that is not very comprehensive, that does not have the level of coverage and endorsements that you need to protect you from a number.
Oh, we lost you there for a minute. The end of it, you said protect you from, and then you went away.
Yeah, if you have a basic level policy and it's not a comprehensive policy, you won't be protected by all of the risks that exist. I know a lot of people that have basic level policies and they're protected by 3 things under those policies: fire, lightning. Okay, those are the things that are protected. And kind of like if the house collapsed, that's not covered. If the house is damaged by water, that's not covered. A basic policy is not going to pick up for everything. So you need to make sure that you are, and there's a lot of them exist. We don't see them sold as often any longer, but I know people who've had insurance policies for 20 years. They've never looked at it,
Yeah.
and they just keep renewing. That is not something you want to do. You want to make sure, just like your taxes, they have to be reviewed every year. Your situation, the changes in your lifestyle has to be reviewed every year. Make sure that your insurance is being reviewed at least every 2 years.
Well, I want people to be able to get a hold of you. So will you tell people how to get a hold of you? Email, phone, anything you want to share, website?
Yes, I own a company called Momentum Risk Management. Yay! A boutique insurance provider. We are located at 2 locations in Manhattan at 1120 Avenue of the Americas. We also have a New Jersey office now because after COVID, I just didn't want to go back into the office in New York. So we have employees in New York, but I'm at my office, my New Jersey office now. But we're reachable. You can check us out on the website. It's momentum-risk.com. Our office number is 888-676-0026, and you can find me at Sylvia K. Alston anywhere on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. That's it.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you being here today. It's so important that we understand insurance and that we make good decisions in insurance. So as you probably know, I always love to end all of my rooms with everybody saying yay. So I'm going to ask John Lee and Linda to join while they're on stage as well. And if you'll say yay with me and have everybody have a great yay day. Okay? 3, 2,